Hello, everyone. My name is Yura Kang. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that this webinar is being hosted on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, Stolo and Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations. It is a privilege to be working and creating on this land. Welcome to our virtual campfire with Heather Anderson, also known as Anish on the trails. I'm the marketing manager here at Hillsound, and we're very lucky to be represented by such an ambitious and hardworking athlete like Heather. And we're always in awe of all of her accomplishments. Heather has hiked over 30,000 miles, which includes 14 thru-hikes. She's broken multiple records, which includes FKTs, or fastest known times, as well as being the first female triple crowner, and simultaneously the first woman to complete the Triple Crown in a single calendar year. Heather has put her experiences and reflections into her book, Thirst 2,600 Miles to Home, which she will discuss more throughout today's chat, as well as another exciting upcoming project.
Let me share my screen.
Oh, I think someone is unmuted. We have a lot of great questions from you all today, so I won't take up any more of your time. Heather, please take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Yura, for that introduction and for hosting this. I know it was kind of last minute, but I'm really glad this worked out, and I'm really glad that we get a chance to do some question and answer. I don't get a chance to do that very often, and also talk a little bit about my book and some more about my adventures. As she said in the introduction, you know, I've been pretty busy hiking. I do a lot of backpacking and hiking and mountain running, climbing, and that sort of thing. And today I'm going to focus mainly on the scope of my experiences on the United States' national scenic trails, 3 of them to be specific. The Appalachian Trail, which runs along the Appalachian Mountains in the eastern part of the United States, from the state of Georgia to Maine. And then also the Pacific Crest Trail, which runs from the Mexican border to the Canadian border through the Sierras and the Cascades, California, Oregon, and Washington. And the third of those quote-unquote Triple Crown trails is the Continental Divide Trail, which follows the Continental Divide from the Canadian border with Montana, up by Glacier National Park and Waterton, all the way down the spine of the Rocky Mountains into New Mexico and to the Mexican border with New Mexico. And so I've hiked each of those 3 trails 3 independent times. And in the process, yeah, I've set fastest known times on the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail. And my first book is called Thirst 2,600 Miles to Home, and that's what I'm going to be reading to you guys from today. And Thirst came out last year, published by Mountaineers Book. And in that book, I wrote mainly about my second Pacific Crest Trail hike, the one I did in 2013. And that is the one where I set the fastest known time by hiking the 2,600 miles in 60 days. And I'm going to give a little plug right now. During quarantine, Yura and I was talking about this before you guys all came on. I haven't been able to get out and go hiking and traveling and doing a lot of the things that I thought I would be doing in 2020, just like everybody else, right? And however, I have been able to write, and it was definitely not my original intent to write more than one book, but you know, the things have aligned, and so I was able to write a second book, and this time it's about my Appalachian Trail hike in 2015, and where I also set a fastest known time. And that is actually being published by Mountaineers Book, same publisher as published Thirst, and that will be coming out early next year. We don't have an official timeline yet, but the title will be Mud, Rocks, Blazes, Letting Go on the Appalachian Trail, so watch for that. And so I'll tell you a little bit about why I hike, and this isn't just FKTs, like those are a tiny fraction of the things that I've done, and they were done for intensely personal reasons. I started hiking pretty accidentally when I was 20 years old. I got a summer job in college working at the Grand Canyon, and I started out cleaning hotel rooms, and mainly I took the job because I wanted to see the Grand Canyon and I needed a summer job, so it seemed logical to combine those two efforts. I grew up in the Midwest, in the state of Michigan, and so the Grand Canyon might as well have been Mars. Like, it was this foreign place that I didn't ever think I would have a chance to travel to otherwise. And so I headed out there, and pretty quickly after I arrived, was invited to go hiking. And it seemed like a great idea. I had no idea what was involved. I didn't know how hard it would be. I didn't know people don't typically hike at Grand Canyon in the summer. It's more of a spring, fall, winter hiking area. And it was a miserable, terrible hike. It was 120 degrees. I ran out of water. I didn't have food. I was delirious. It was a mess. And by the time I staggered up out of that canyon, I think a lot of people would have just been like, that was horrible. And I thought, wow, that was incredible, and I want to do it again. Maybe just suffer a little less. And since that time, I've spent as much time as I can on the trails. And that led me to hiking the Appalachian Trail just a couple years later, and on to the Pacific Crest, Continental Divide, and many, many other hiking endeavors over the years and in many places. And after I finished my Triple Crown, as they call it, after I finished hiking the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail, I was 25 and had basically worked seasonal jobs, quit them, and gone hiking for most of my early 20s so that I could be out on trails as much. And I decided that I needed to come up with a more sustainable way of life. And so I tried to get a regular job, settle down, and, forget about through hiking, still get out and do hikes on the weekends. And I took up ultramarathon running and things like that. And after a few years of this, that is what led me to the realization that that was the unsustainable lifestyle for me, not the one that I had been living. And that spending all the time that I could, as much as possible, on the trails and orienting myself and my life to be on trail, which is my happy place. It's where I feel the most whole. It's where I learn to love and respect and value myself as a unique individual that I am. It's where I learn to respect and love other people for the unique individuals that they are. And it's where I learn to feel connection with the earth itself. This experience of spending as much time outdoors, that was what I needed in life. I didn't need to work a 9-to-5 or, pursue certain paths that everyone, passively or actively told me I needed to do. That wasn't what life was for me. What life was for me is spending my time on the trails and in the mountains. And so reaching that point where I realized that that was what I needed was what led me out onto the Pacific Crest Trail in 2013. Basically, I was dissolving the life that I had been living and trying to find my way back to the trails and figure out how I was going to spend as much time maximally on the trails and in nature as possible. I had no idea what that would look like at that time. I only knew that I had to go. And so in June of 2013, I was on a plane and headed for San Diego to embark on this attempt to hike the PCT in 60 days. And I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit from Thirst. I'll read you that very first day and kind of how I felt setting out there. On June 6th, I boarded a plane and flew from Seattle to San Diego, soaring over the length of the mountain ranges I would soon traverse on foot. As the plane swooped over brown hillsides and stucco homes with tile roofs, I realized how very far I was from Washington, which had become my home. Staring east, where clouds and ridges were visible, faint and low on the horizon, I remembered the last time I was there, 8 years younger and vastly inexperienced. I had faced the same distance, but this time I knew the enormity of the land extending between myself and Washington. I felt the pull of the mountains I knew like friends, and the people there that I loved. A small voice inside me whispered, all that's left to do then is walk. Day 1, 42 miles. 2 days later, I stood at the southern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail. 3 square wooden pillars marked one end of the trail where it met the border with Mexico, just outside Campo, California. Seeing the monument peeling from years of baking in the desert sun, I wondered if I had enough sunscreen. It was barely 6 a.m., and I was already sweating. The friends who'd driven me to the trailhead were excited. I was scared to death. I wasn't sure why I had decided to attempt to set a fastest known time on the PCT. When most people hit age 30, their crisis involves spending a lot of money, not hiking over 40 miles a day alone across the country. I pretended to make sure I had everything in order to delay the inevitable. When I had stalled as long as I could, I wrote my intention vaguely in the register. Well, here goes. After a moment's thought, I decided that for posterity, I should make it a little clearer. I added in smaller print to the side, to Canada. I couldn't bring myself to state that I was attempting a record hike, because I was certain that I would fail. I closed the book and my friends took some pictures. Standing in front of the mountain as I stared at the desert, I recalled how foreboding it had seemed the last time I'd stood there. But right then, looking at the bare landscape dotted with scraggly bushes and cacti, I remembered that the desert is beautiful too. Finally, I could stall no longer. I strode confidently to my friends, even though inside I was screaming, I can't do this. As the Pacific Crest Trail wove past the tiny hamlet of Campo and into the Southern California desert, I was surprised to feel a sense of fluidity in my body. Soon the trail was gliding underfoot, despite the heat and the weight of my water-laden pack. All the worry melted away. I am home. Everything is going to be okay. My stomach was full of butterflies, and yet there was no longer any dread or worry or fuss. I was finally walking. Whatever was to be, would be. There was nothing more to think about except putting one foot in front of the other and drinking deeply of the natural world around me. The half-decade I'd spent trying to conform to society was a charade. Hiking was my reality. Walking into the desert alone felt like waking up from a long nightmare. With each step, I felt closer, not only to my home in Washington, but also to my true self. And I think that that very day, starting out on that journey, I felt like I was walking away from the life I had been living and into this unknown life. And I didn't really have any idea what I was going to do next. All I knew is I was going to walk to Canada and I was going to attempt to walk there as fast as I possibly could, because I felt like inherent in that endeavor, I was going to discover something about myself and about my path in life and what I should do. I was kind of looking for a neon sign alongside the trail that was going to say, Anish, this is what you need to do with your life. And there is no neon sign along the PCT. I will tell you that right now if you're thinking about hiking it. There's no neon sign. But in that very moment, I began to get the inkling of what I was going to find out there. And what I was going to find out there is a deeper connection with myself. Nature, for me, provides this clarity where I'm not being constantly bombarded and distracted by all of the outside sensory input that we have from screens and people and traffic and noise and our jobs. When you're out in nature, it's just you moving a natural rhythm. Even when you're trying to set a fastest noon time, I never walked more than 3 miles per hour. It's really impossible not to feel the sense of meditative quality when you're out there in nature, alone with your thoughts, moving through the landscape, experiencing the world the way we should. And so I began to understand acceptance of the natural world, which led to learning acceptance of myself, which led to a peace that opened me up to my own self and my own truth, and learning that following that was the only way that I was going to be happy in this life, whether I was on trails or off trails or working a job or not working a job. I had to make peace and come to terms with the person that I was. And that's one of the gifts that the PCT gave me. And so I explore a lot of those issues in Thirst. And at the end of Thirst, there's still some unanswered questions. And part of the difficulty for me as a writer going back in time and writing about myself in a place before the growth is that I want to tell the full story. And that is what led me to writing Mud, Rocks, Blazes, because I wanted to continue the story began at Thirst. I wanted to continue to share the growth and the gifts that the trail has given me that have allowed me to live a life reflective of my true self, both on and off the trail. And so that kind of sums up my little book talk. I know you, Russell, we had a lot of really good questions come in, so I want to make sure I leave time for that. So Yura, do you have some questions for me from our audience?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your story and explaining a little bit more about how you began your journey. We have a lot of great questions. So first off, kind of a really classic question. What's the one thing you never behind for a hike?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full question.
What's the one thing you never leave behind for a hike?
Oh, okay. So if you're going on it, the obvious thing is you never leave behind your backpack. You have to have something to carry your things in. But for me personally, there's a lot of preparation that goes into a hike, a backpacking trip, more than just like a day hike. Behind the scenes, especially when I'm going to an unknown area. And I spend a lot of time researching the weather and, what conditions to expect out there, because the better prepared you are, the happier you're going to be out there. And so, yeah, I mean, there's the big 3 items on a backpacking trip. You never want to be without a proper shelter, one that you set up before and you actually know how to set it up effectively so that it's not like a downpour and you're trying desperately to set your tent up with your time. And a sturdy backpack that fits you well and is comfortable. Next to your feet, like your backpack is the item that needs to fit you the most comfortably out there, because if your feet are unhappy or your back is unhappy, you're going to be really unhappy. So making sure that you've got a really good fit with your footwear and your backpack, a good shelter, and then an appropriately rated sleeping bag. Those are all really crucial to have a comfortable and successful backpacking trip.
Were there any moments where you felt like you could have been better prepared, or like were there any moments where you thought you weren't like expecting and wish you had something different?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that's a lot of how we learn what to expect and how to adapt. When I hiked the PCT in 2013, within my book, I talk a lot about running out of water, because at that time we didn't have live interactive updates on your water sources that you can access on your phone. And there weren't people hiking in June. Most people started hiking in March and April. Now we have a permit system that spreads people out and it's easier to get lifetime data. But yeah, I mean, I had never hiked in triple-digit temperature. I had never had to calculate how much I was going to sweat and how much I needed to drink in those conditions. And so it was a learning process. And, eventually figured out how to keep hydrated and, how much water I should carry to ensure that I didn't run out. But yeah, I mean, even somebody who had already completed the Triple Crown is still learning. I still learn things when I go out. Every time there's like something interesting. And these days I learn a lot more about the plants and the animals in the area. That's like something that's super interesting to me that up until now I've known nothing about. And so I've learned to start taking lots of pictures to research when I get home and discover new things there. But yeah, there's always an endless supply of things to learn when you're out hiking.
After all the hikes you've done, do you have a favorite hike and why?
It's kind of like asking a parent their favorite child. I don't say I have a favorite hike, like a favorite trail specific, but I definitely have a favorite region in the Pacific Northwest. And I just love the Pacific Northwest. So the mountains there, I love everything about it, and I feel like I could hike there endlessly and never see it all.
Speaking of Pacific Northwest, someone's asking, what is your favorite time to hike the PCT through Washington?
August. That's the best month to be on PCT in Washington. Typically, any lingering snow is gone or very navigable at that point, and you don't have a lot of rainfall. So it's usually a relatively pleasant time. The bugs have usually abated. Pretty good time to be out.
So one of my favorite parts about hiking is getting to cook and eat with fabulous views. Do you have any favorite stoveless meals that are a long time go-tos for you?
It's funny because like at home I cook a lot and I'm very creative in the kitchen and I really enjoy cooking. But when I'm out hiking, I am probably one of the most lazy people, because like I just hike all day and at the end of the day I just want food in my mouth and I don't really care that much. But I'd say like one of the easiest, especially no-cook meals that I've done that can be made fancy or eaten plain is dehydrated refried beans. And they're really inexpensive, they're really filling and nutrient dense. But you can do things like pack out avocados, which I almost always do, or cheese, or you can add spices, you can buy cilantro. I mean, if you're wanting to, you can carry a lot of things that can make beans really fancy. You can carry tortillas, put them in a wrap, or you can eat them really plain, just spoonfuls of beans because you're really tired. They're very versatile, and so you can do a lot with those. So those have been one of my go-tos for years, especially as a no-cook meal, because they rehydrate really rapidly, and you can add anything you want to make them good.
Do you ever take into consideration of what you're eating as opposed to how much hydration you have left? Does that affect your decisions?
It does. There's definitely been some times where like the water source either didn't exist or it wasn't very good or something like that, where I was planning to take water from that, and then I just end up not eating my dinner that night because it was like a dinner that you had to hydrate. So I eat my breakfast and then I end up eating, beans for lunch the next day. It's like you remain flexible as best you can. And for me, like in deserty areas and like the PCT and like when I hiked the Arizona Trail, I didn't really carry much in the way of dehydrated food because I didn't want to be reliant on having to have a water source. I don't ever, I can't say ever, but almost never camp near a water source. Just for, I think they're easily impacted, and I feel like it's a good way to have an animal encounter. So I just try to stay way away from water sources. I dry camp almost every night. So, in places like the desert where you have to carry so much water anyway, then I tend to pack out food that doesn't need water added to it in a way to conserve that.
You mentioned you love to cook at home. What would your like what I eat in a day kind of thing look like for you?
It kind of depends a little bit on what I'm doing. Like when I'm really active, I eat a lot more than when I'm not very active. But usually I eat breakfast that's, I'm gluten intolerant, so like I have to be gluten free with everything. But I'll usually make homemade like gluten free breads and things like that. And so I'll do that with some sort of like nut butter and honey or jelly or something like that, so that I get a lot of calories and a lot of each of my macros first thing in the morning. And then, almost every day I eat a salad and smoothie for lunch, make a really big fancy salad with avocado and oil and nuts and seeds and lots of different veggies, something super nutritious. And then dinner, I really love the like Thai food and pho and things like that. So a lot of times I make things like that for dinner, usually vegetable based. And I love peanut sauce, pretty much anything. So I eat a lot of those sorts of meals for the evening. But yeah, I basically just try to eat really nutrient dense food at home to help keep my body healthy and strong, especially if I'm leading up to a hike. I try to really bump up my nutrient intake leading into that.
Just shifting gears here a little bit. You mentioned that your definition of sustainable life was different than what you thought it would be prior to all of these adventures. What motivates you?
Yeah, so what I learned was that, kind of my whole life I had been told that you progress through life in this way. You go from high school to college to a career, to buying a home, and all of these things you work through life in this pattern. And what I realized was that for me, that pattern wasn't what made me happy. What made me happy was spending, my time in the mountains, and that lifestyle of spending all my time out there, taking my summers off to go out there and not necessarily following that pattern was what people kept telling me was unsustainable. And then I had this realization that as long as I'm happy and I can continue to do this, it is sustainable. It's just not the pattern that I've been told that I have to follow. And so it was really just coming to terms with the fact that it was okay for me to follow my own path and do something that was, non-traditional. And so it was definitely a mindset shift as far as what I believed was okay for me to do.
On these long through hikes, most of the time you're hiking solo, or most of the time, what inspires you to hike alone?
I'm an extreme introvert, and so I really like spending all my time alone. I always have ever since I was a kid. I think my parents were like really frustrated that I didn't want to interact with my friends. Like, I didn't want to go out and do that. I was like much happier like playing in my room or playing in the yard by myself. Like, I've just always been much happier on my own than around other people. And so when I first started hiking, I hiked with other people a decent amount just because it was this new and scary thing. Like, I'd never spent time outdoors and doing that sort of thing and hiking. But as I became more confident in the realm of the outdoors and in hiking, that's when I started being confident enough to start going by myself. And just, it was like anything else. I enjoy everything by myself. So of course I enjoy hiking by myself.
And in doing so, in hiking alone, what have you found in yourself?
I definitely just learned a lot about who I am as a person, and I've, discovered, talents and strengths and weaknesses, and it's definitely this great thing when you're out there by yourself. You get to really put yourself through all kinds of experiences and really just, I don't know, see yourself for a lot of times for the first time. I mean, I think that when you're around other people all of the time, in some way there's always a give and take, and so you're always reliant or giving in to other people, compromising in certain things, and you're very seldom like really on your own, and you must like figure it out on your own and be self-sufficient. And being out in nature, like doing these long treks solo, you're not completely alone. Obviously, you go into towns and things like that for your resupply, but you spend a good deal of your time being self-sufficient, and so it really allows you to really see yourself in this new role. And I think most people find that they're stronger and braver than they ever really thought they were when they go out and they hike solo.
And I think a lot of times people, or I guess myself, I enjoy hiking with other people just because I think it helps me it motivates me to keep going when I'm tired and things like that. So how do you keep pushing through on a hiking day when you feel like you have nothing left in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I benefit from the fact that I'm a very goal-oriented person, and so for me, just like it's my default to achieve the goal, like in anything, in any aspect. I mean, even in small things in life, and so that helps me self-motivate. Yeah. So if I'm out there and things are hard, it's like, well, no, you're going to this spot to camp, or you have to go this far, or whatever. But that being said, one of the things I've learned, especially after pushing myself very hard and finding my limits and breaking records and failing to break records and all of this complex stuff that comes when you're an athlete, I have definitely learned to give myself grace. And when I don't want to achieve the goal, I don't. And whether that just means camping early or quitting a trip and being like, I just don't want to do this right now. I've learned to accept that is okay too, and it's no longer a push through at all costs scenario.
So does that mean that your like, I guess, intuition or kind of gut instinct has become, or you've become more in tune with that through the years of hiking alone?
Definitely. That's part, I think, of the self-knowledge I've gained is to really know myself and know how I feel, and to discern between, well, this is tough right now and I'm not having fun right now, but it'll get better, or this just isn't right for me right now and I don't want to do this anymore, and it's okay. And this is very intuitive self-knowledge is something that I've really honed and gained more familiarity with by spending a lot of time solo in the outdoors.
Right. And I guess you learn a lot more about yourself through the years. And I think sometimes when people push through that feeling of I can't do this anymore, it leads to injury or, accidents and things like that. Are there moments where you were really glad you didn't push through or, avoided an injury or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've attempted multiple FKTs. I've been successful at 3 of them, and I've failed miserably at a few others. And it's a funny thing to be like, I failed at this thing, because I think both of the times that I quit an FKT attempt or turned around on a hike, you know, because I've done that other times too. It wasn't FKTs. I just also turned around on hikes and been like, no, I'm not going to do this. I've learned as much or more perhaps in the times that I did push through. And I think that sometimes pushing through those barriers, whether they're real or perceived, can lead you to a sense of empowerment and growth. But I also think that knowing the appropriate time to not push through, and it's a very fine line and it's different for every person, can also lead to self-improvement and personal growth. And so for me, like when I was attempting to do the unsupported Colorado Trail FKT a few years ago, you know, I had this foot injury that happened, and you know, it was extremely painful and swollen, and I didn't know if I had a stress fracture. I mean, it seemed very serious because it was very painful, and I mean, I couldn't get my sock off my foot. It was really bad. And you know, I was like, you know what? I don't have anything to prove to anyone. Like, I was doing this for myself. I was doing this for fun. You know, I don't want to injure myself. There's no point in this. And so, like, I quit. I quit the attempt. I rested for a few days and, you know, got a diagnosis that it was just severe tendonitis. So it turns out it was fine. You know, I just had to let it heal. It wasn't a fracture. But I was really glad I didn't push myself to that, because for me, mentally, it was important to say I value and love my body enough to not risk injuring it for something that should be, like, fun. That's like a hobby. You know, and that I was okay with it and didn't feel guilt over stopping, or like feel like I failed, or like because I didn't achieve the goal. So we said earlier, I always like to achieve the goal. So learning to be okay that with the fact that sometimes you're not going to achieve the goal and you're going to achieve a different type of goal. For me, learning to take care of my body and listen to it.
Yeah, that's really important. I want to know, after all these years and thousands of miles later, is hiking still just as fun as you first fell in love with it?
You know, it is, and I think that because it's the thing that I love doing, and it's there are times when I don't feel like hiking, and last year I had a lot of days where I just didn't feel like it, and it was like really weird to me to not feel like hiking and not want to go hiking. And you know, I was dealing with a lot of burnout, and you know, I was dealing with grief from loss of a family member, and I was worried. I was like, wow, here, it finally happened after all these years and all these miles. Now I don't want to hike anymore, you know, like now I have to find a new hobby. And the reality is, like, once I worked through, you know, the phases of grief and, you know, the phases of burnout and things like that, and, you know, this year, you know, I haven't got to hike as much, but now it's like when I go out and I do go hiking, there's that sense of happiness and wonder, and I'm always happy to be out on the trails, you know, after a stressful day, even just like a short walk in the woods near where I live, you know, it just resets me. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have that excitement because I've done it so much. It's not like I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be like? Because you know, I kind of know what it's going to be like. But it's definitely more of a sense of contentment and deep happiness to be out there.
You've mentioned a couple times that you're very goal-oriented, and so do you, I mean, you've achieved so many things and there's so many accomplishments under your belt, but do you still have a list of things that you'd like to complete, and what is still on your like dream list, I guess?
It's definitely a never-ending list of things that I want to do and see and places I want to go. And I think that for me, I don't want to focus as much on necessarily like thru-hiking. Like, okay, I have to walk from point A to point B on this route, and I need to check off all these long distance hikes. I have to check off these thru-hikes. That's not necessarily ever the way I was. It's certainly not the thing I'm interested in right now. I think to me, a lot of what I enjoyed about my early years of thru-hiking was seeing places for the first time. Like when I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, I had never been to California, Oregon, or Washington. And so for me, hiking across the length of those states, seeing them all for the first time through that lens was really incredible. And so I haven't traveled a lot internationally, but I've traveled a ton in the United States. And thru-hiking is what brought me to that. I probably wouldn't have traveled as much if I hadn't found hiking. And so definitely at this point in my life, rather than focusing on through hiking, I definitely am focusing more on travel. Obviously, not this year, uh, but someday in the future, hopefully, we'll be traveling again and going to a lot of places. And last year, I was able to go to a lot of places that were along these long distance trails that I had tasted before, and actually spend some time in there, really exploring them. And, you know, one of the places that I really am eager to spend a lot of time is the desert Southwest, like Utah and Arizona and Mexico. I think that there's like so much there that's of interest to me that you just kind of glimpse when you're hiking things like the Arizona Trail and the Continental Divide Trail, and I want to go back and spend a lot more time there. So yeah, the immersive experiences in beautiful places is really what I'm seeking left on my list.
Someone asked, what is your sort of, I guess, training? What does your training look like, and how do you strategize for a certain trail? Or you mentioned there's other trails and hikes that you'd like to do. How would you go about planning for those and setting up strategies to complete it?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I run almost every day, and I do yoga and cross training, things that just kind of keep me at a base level of fitness so that I can go out and do adventures whenever the opportunity presents themselves to me. So for me, like, a lot of my preparation isn't necessarily physical preparation, but it's more the logistical preparation. And I think that they're both important for success on a trip. So I think definitely when you identify a trip or something that you want to do, a route that you want to do, whatever it is, it's good to ask yourself some questions like, am I physically capable of this right now, or do I need to do some work in that area? And also, like, logistically, do I know what I need for this route, or do I need to research this more? Are there permits? You know, definitely a lot of time spent on the computer in advance of any trip, trying to like figure out what will make one a successful trip.
Do you have a favorite season or kind of landscape that you like to hike through?
And you know, it kind of depends on the region. Definitely out in the Pacific Northwest, summer, I think, is the best season to be out. You know, it's kind of rainy and dark and dreary the rest of the year, and the summer is the best there. But so for like the East Coast and the desert, for like Utah and stuff like that, like, I really love the autumn. Just out east, the colors are phenomenal then, and temperatures are cooler, humidity is less. And then, you know, down in like the desert stuff, that's when you actually get pleasant daytime temperatures. It gets kind of chilly overnight, but yeah, I definitely think that the summer and the fall, kind of depending on where you're at, are my favorite seasons to hike.
This is kind of a classic, I guess, interview question, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Hopefully on a trail somewhere. You know, it's interesting. Definitely the trail has taught me to kind of go with the flow a lot more than my goal-oriented nature would want me to. And, you know, definitely 2020 has taught me a lot about accepting the fact that your plans are not always going to go through. And so for me, you know, definitely I'm learning continually how to be more in the moment and more day by day. I mean, hopefully I'll be traveling and hiking, you know, until the day I die. I hope that I will have a long life full of adventure and travel. But there are no guarantees. There's no guarantee of even having tomorrow. So I really try to focus on what's going on right in front of me and making each day worth it.
Just as we get closer to wrapping up here, what is the one takeaway that you hope everyone here today is getting from this chat?
You know, the thing that keeps me going out in public and doing talks and writing books and things like that is sharing the fact and encouraging people that whatever path they want to follow in life is valid. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking that I was broken or something was wrong with me, and dealing with all these like guilty emotions because I wasn't fitting a norm. I wasn't fitting stereotype. It wasn't fitting what I was supposed to be. You know, I had this like image of like what I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And the fact is, like, you know, your life is your life, and that you should be pursuing whatever it is that makes you the happiest and makes you feel like the most full, truthful reflection of your own self. And that is what I hope that people get from reading my books and from listening to me speak and from interacting with me and looking at the things I've done. You know, I've done things because I wanted to do them because they make me happy. And that in turn has led to me living a life that feels purposeful and happy and content. And I wish that for everyone.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. I definitely learned a lot. Obviously, we get to talk through email and things like that, but this was definitely a good chance for me, and I hope everybody else to learn more about your journey and to keep posted about all the new things that you're up to in the coming months and years. Everyone here, you can follow Heather at Anish Hikes, and she has a new book coming up, like she mentioned. So follow along, and and she already has a book out called "There's 2,600 Miles to Home," so you can check that out. And you can follow us at Hillsound Equipment on Instagram and Facebook. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Outdoor Retailer Online, and that you're all staying safe and healthy during this time. Thank you guys so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.